Have you ever wondered how the world plunged into its most devastating conflict, World War II? It's a tale that begins in the wake of the Great War, with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. This treaty, meant to ensure lasting peace, instead sowed seeds of resentment, particularly in Germany, setting the stage for future conflict. Meanwhile, the world watched as fascism began to rise in Italy, under the iron fist of Benito Mussolini. His authoritarian rule was a precursor to what would soon emerge in Germany, where Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party ascended to power. The potent mix of economic hardship and nationalistic fervor was a tinderbox waiting to ignite. Across the Pacific, the Japanese invasion of China marked the beginning of a brutal campaign in the East. These major events unfolding across the globe were the ominous prelude to the impending catastrophe. These events set the stage for a global conflict that would change the course of history. September 1st, 1939, a day that will forever live in infamy. It was a day that dawned like any other, but by the time dusk fell, the world had been irrevocably altered. The German forces, under Adolf Hitler's command, launched a full-scale invasion of Poland. This marked the start of what would become the deadliest conflict in human history, World War II. The invasion was swift and brutal. Poland, caught off guard by the sudden onslaught, struggled to mount an effective defense against the German war machine. The blitzkrieg tactics employed by the Nazis, emphasizing speed and surprise, proved devastatingly efficient. In less than a month, Poland had been effectively overrun, its army crushed, and its cities laid to waste. The world watched on in shock and horror. The invasion of Poland was a blatant violation of international law, a flagrant disregard for the sovereignty of nations. It was a wake-up call for the world powers, who had hoped to avoid another global conflict after the devastation wrought by the First World War. France and the United Kingdom were quick to respond. On September 3rd, just 2 days after the invasion, they declared war on Germany, honoring their pledge to defend Poland's sovereignty. It was a momentous decision, one that would draw them into a brutal 6-year struggle. Across the Atlantic, the United States watched on with growing concern. While they remained officially neutral at this stage, the invasion marked a turning point in their foreign policy. It was becoming increasingly clear that isolationism was no longer a viable option in the face of such aggression. In the East, the Soviet Union also took note. Although they had signed a non-aggression pact with Germany just days before the invasion, the events in Poland raised questions about Hitler's true intentions. With these declarations, the world was once again at war. As the war progressed, it became clear that this was no ordinary conflict. From the brooding storm clouds of 1940 to the chilling winds of 1942, the world found itself in the throes of a war unlike any other. Let's rewind a bit to the summer of 1940. Europe was under a dark shadow, with the Battle of Britain raging in the skies. The German Luftwaffe unleashed a rain of destruction, seeking to crush the island nation's spirit. Yet, the Royal Air Force, the resilient few, fought back with a tenacity that stunned the world. Their determination, their courage, served as a beacon of hope in those troubled times. But the war wasn't just confined to Europe. In the East, Hitler made a gamble, a move that would ultimately contribute to his downfall: the invasion of the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa, as it was known, was a brutal campaign that saw the largest military invasion in history. The clash between the German Wehrmacht and the Red Army was a titanic struggle, a symphony of violence and destruction that would forever scar the landscape of Eastern Europe. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the United States had been watching from the sidelines. That changed on a fateful Sunday in December 1941. The bombing of Pearl Harbor by the Japanese forces was a shocking surprise attack that thrust the United States into the maelstrom of war. This day of infamy, as President Roosevelt called it, marked the entry of a new player on the global stage, one that would have a profound impact on the course of the war. Weaving through these major events, it's clear that the period from 1940 to 1942 was a pivotal phase in the war. The pieces of the global chessboard were shifting, the stakes were escalating, and the world held its breath, bracing for what was yet to come. These events marked a turning point in the war, and the world would never be the same. 1943, the tide of war begins to turn. In the heart of Mother Russia, the Battle of Stalingrad rages on. It's a brutal fight for control of a city that has become symbolic of Soviet resistance. The German forces, once believed invincible, are now trapped in a bitter winter standoff. After 6 grueling months, the Soviets finally claim victory in early 1943. This momentous event marks a significant turning point in the conflict, the first major defeat of Hitler's forces, signaling that the Axis powers may not be as invincible as they once seemed. As we move into the summer of 1944, the Allies are planning a daring and decisive move. A vast armada of ships, planes, and men gather in the English Channel, their sights set on the beaches of Normandy. The D-Day invasion, as it would come to be known, is the largest amphibious assault in history. The surprise attack catches the German forces off guard, and the Allies gain a crucial foothold in Western Europe. Meanwhile, halfway around the world, another significant event unfolds. Rome, the Eternal City, is under the yoke of German occupation. The Italian resistance, with the support of Allied forces, rises against the oppressors. After a hard-fought campaign, the city is finally liberated in June 1944. The fall of Rome, the first Axis capital to be freed, serves as a beacon of hope, a symbol of the impending downfall of the Axis powers. The year 1944 closes with the Allies advancing on all fronts, from the frozen grounds of Russia to the sun-drenched beaches of Normandy. From the ancient streets of Rome to the vast expanses of the Pacific, the tide of war has indeed turned. The once formidable Axis powers are now on the defensive. The end of the conflict, though still a hard-fought journey away, is starting to come into view. With these victories, the Allies began to see the light at the end of the tunnel. 1945, the final year of the war, a year that would see some of the most defining moments of the Second World War. The world held its breath as the Battle of Berlin raged on. It was a savage conflict, a desperate final stand for the Axis forces. The city was besieged, encircled by the Allies, who were determined to bring the war to a conclusion. The ferocity of the Battle of Berlin was a testament to the intensity of the struggle. Despite the dire circumstances, the Axis forces fought with a tenacity that was both admirable and horrifying. But ultimately, the Allied forces proved too strong, too resolute. The battle ended in May with the unconditional surrender of Germany, a momentous event that marked the end of the war in Europe. But the war was not over. The Pacific theater was still active. Japan, isolated yet defiant, refused to yield. The Allies, weary of the protracted war, made a decision that would alter the course of history. In August, 2 atomic bombs were dropped on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The devastation was unimaginable. The cities were leveled, and the human cost was simply incalculable. The world was introduced to the horrifying power of nuclear weaponry. The aftermath was a stark reminder of the destructive capabilities of mankind. Japan, faced with this unprecedented devastation, surrendered. On September 2nd, aboard the USS Missouri, Japan signed the official instrument of surrender. It was the final act of the Second World War. With these events, World War II came to an end, but the effects of the war would be felt for generations to come. The war had forever changed the world. It had shown the depths of human cruelty and the heights of human courage. The echoes of the conflict would reverberate through the years, shaping the world we know today. The end of the war was not just a conclusion, but also the beginning of a new era, a time of reflection, healing, and rebuilding, a time to remember the past and look towards the future. The aftermath of World War II was a time of reflection and reckoning. The world had witnessed a conflict of unprecedented scale and devastation, and the echoes of its impact resonated in every corner of the globe. This was not just a war that had ended, but one that had irrevocably changed the world. In the wake of the conflict, the United Nations was established, a symbol of hope for a world yearning for peace and unity. The Cold War began, a silent and shadowy conflict between two superpowers, fueled by ideological differences. Meanwhile, the decolonization of Africa and Asia marked the dawn of a new era, as nations once subjugated claimed their rightful place on the world stage. World War II was a pivotal moment in history, one that continues to shape our world today. As we reflect on its impact, we are reminded of the enduring power of human resilience and the unyielding pursuit of a better future.